All right, let's get back into the Cold War here and start with the National Security Act of 1947. And the National Security Act of 1947 does four things that you're going to need to know. First of all, it will create the Department of Defense that's going to be housed in the Pentagon. Right? Previously, we've had the War Department, so it's going to reorganize that and rename it. They thought maybe War Department sounded a little, aggressive. So, Department of Defense will get created thanks to the National Security Act. Number two, it would create the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Joint Chiefs of Staff. They're the uniformed heads of each branch of service. So the head of the Army, head of the Navy, head of the Air Force, all of those. And they will advise the president anytime there's a national crisis involving the military. The Joint Chiefs of Staff are the first place the president goes for advice. Okay. Third, the National Security Act will create the National Security Council, the NSC, it's called, the National Security Council. And that group will advise the president on security matters. Every day, the first thing that happens every day, the president gets a National Security Council briefing on what's happened around the world the previous evening, the previous night, hot spots around the world that we're paying attention to, things like that. But the National Security Council will brief the president every day on security matters around the world and here at home. And the fourth thing that the National Security Act does is to create the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. And the CIA will be in charge of foreign fact gathering. These are our spies. This is how it's up to the CIA, it's the job of the CIA to keep an eye on foreign countries and foreign governments and what they're doing. So the National Security Act does those four very important things. Department of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the National Security Council, and the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. Right? The Voice of America is a radio station, and it is set up to broadcast behind the Iron Curtain. If you think back to our first slide, that white line that divided communist Eastern Europe from democratic Western Europe, there are a series of radio towers built all along the western side of that line, broadcasting a radio signal into communist countries for people with a radio to pick up. And it's a propaganda message, telling them, how bad communism is, how great democracy is, how much better it would be if you would overthrow your communist government and all of that. So it's a propaganda radio station. Right? And here you see the logo there, the Voice of America, broadcasting to the world, really to the communist world. Right? The Selective Service Act is extremely important for you as a junior in high school and a man. The Selective Service Act is better known as the draft. Right? Selective Service Act is the basis for our current system that of all males 18 and older registering with the military. When you turn 18, you will be required to register with the military for military service if there is another draft. Now, I don't think there will be another draft. I don't think there will ever be another draft. All draft gets you is an army full of malcontents and troublemakers who don't want to be there. Our army now is plenty large enough. You've got to actually try to get in. So I don't think there will be another draft, but regardless, when you turn 18, you have to sign up with the military. You can do it online, you can do it at a post office, you can do it at a government office, you can mail it in. But you're going to have to register. If you don't, you're going to have problems. Next time you go to renew your driver's license, they won't. When you go to apply for financial aid in college, you won't get any. If you try to get a new passport and you haven't registered, you can't get it. So they're going to get you to register one way or another. You're going to have to sign up. So when you turn 18, that's one of the things you need to do, is register with Selective Service. It doesn't mean you're going into the military. You can if you want, but it doesn't mean you're going to get drafted. Anyway, let's move on here. Let's talk briefly about NATO. NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And it's just what you would think. It's a treaty made up of countries around the North Atlantic. The United States, in 1948, this is when this starts, the United States would join Britain, France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. You don't have to know those. But the U.S. would join mainly Northern European countries in a treaty, a military alliance, that if one of them was attacked, presumably by the Soviet Union, the United States and all the other members would defend the country that was attacked. By 1955, 15 countries, the United States, Canada, and Northern European countries mainly, would all join together to form NATO. NATO is still around today. Anytime some problem flares up in Europe, NATO is the first to address it. Eventually it might get to the UN, but NATO is the first group. Okay? Now, something we mentioned before, Berlin being divided, when we talked about the Iron Curtain and Europe getting divided, I briefly mentioned that that Berlin would also be divided. And so it is. So if you look up at the top of the page there, you'll see a map. Okay? This on the right, okay, that is the former Germany. This is communist East Germany in red, controlled by the Soviet Union. This is free and democratic West Germany, okay, controlled by the United Kingdom, the United States, and France. Okay? So West Germany here in the blues and green, East Germany in red. Okay? Now in the middle of that, this itty bitty little circle right there, that's Berlin. This map on the left is Berlin. Okay? And Berlin is divided just like Germany was divided into 4 parts. You would end up with a communist East Berlin and a free democratic West Berlin. East Berlin would be controlled by the Soviet Union. West Berlin is controlled by the United States, Britain, and France. Okay? So, in the middle of this whole communist East Germany, you have one little island of democracy, West Berlin, surrounded by communism, because it's in the middle of East Germany. Okay? Well, in 1948, remember, this Germany's been divided for 3 years now. In 1948, after 3 years of divided Berlin, Stalin decided he had had enough of this little island of democracy here in the middle of his communist country. So Stalin decides he's going to shut down West Berlin. He surrounds it and he shuts down all the roads and railroads going into West Berlin. Figures, I'll starve them out and dare the Americans to cross the line. The British and the French too, mainly the Americans. Well, Truman decides he's not giving up on West Berlin. And if we can't truck or train supplies into the city, we'll fly them in what comes to be known as the Berlin Airlift. The Berlin Airlift. Okay? For almost a year, nearly a year, flights are flown from West Germany, okay, into West Berlin, okay, almost daring Stalin to shoot down a plane. If he did, he knew he was starting World War III. Okay. So the Berlin airlift would keep West Berlin supplied for almost a year. Stalin will eventually back down. He opens up the border again to West Berlin, and trains are able to come into, and trucks, into the city. So it was a game of chicken, and Stalin blinked. He backed down. Okay? But the Berlin airlift was a very, very big deal here. May of 1949, the blockade ends. That same year, East Germany and West Germany will become two independent countries. And it's clear we're not going back. Okay? So in 1949, we see the blockade end, and we get Communist East Germany and Democratic West Germany. Okay. Meanwhile, we've talked all about Europe after the war. Let's look at Asia after the war. Okay? Japan, oops, there you go, will get reorganized and rebuilt after the war, following the dropping of the atomic bombs, and a lot of rebuilding is going to need to go on, plus the bombing, constant bombing of Tokyo. Japan needs to be reorganized and rebuilt, and the man in charge of that is the man who led to its demise here, its downfall, General Douglas MacArthur, M-A-C-A-R-T-H-U-R, M-A-C-A-R-T-H-U-R, MacArthur, Douglas MacArthur. He was commander of all Allied forces in the Pacific, and he is going to be in charge of rebuilding Japan. He will rebuild Japan on a Western democratic model. Japan's new government is going to look amazingly similar to the United States government. They will have elected leaders. They will have a Congress. They will have a Western-style economy. They will be built on the U.S. model, manufacturing and technology. Okay? And Japan welcomes this modernization. They welcome all the help they can get. And Japan will use that to become one of the leading economies in the Pacific, in Asia, thanks to MacArthur's efforts to rebuild it. Okay. China, on the other hand, is going to be just the opposite. China is going to resist any efforts to modernize. China will stick to an agrarian, farm-based economy. They don't want any Western influence. They fight Western influence. Now, what's going on in China is a civil war. Okay? The nationalists, led by a man named Chiang Kai-shek, these are the nationalists fighting for democracy, okay, are led by Chiang Kai-shek, the nationalists. The other side are the communists, led by Mao Zedong. Okay? And long story short here, okay, Mao, Chairman Mao, as he is known, Chairman Mao and the communists will win this war. When they do, Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists will flee China and go to the offshore island of Formosa, F-O-R-M-O-S-A, F-O-R-M-O-S-A, Formosa. We know it not as Formosa. We know it today as Taiwan. Okay? And it's one of the hot spots in the world everybody keeps an eye on, because Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists will set up their own country in Taiwan. They consider Taiwan to be a free, independent country. China considers Taiwan to be part of China, a one China policy. Okay? Lastly, in September 1949, the Soviet Union exploded an atomic bomb. They catch up with the United States. Now, the U.S. was completely caught off guard here because we did not expect the Soviets to be able to test an atomic bomb for about another 3 years or so. They are way ahead of our estimates. It is at that point that President Truman will order American scientists to develop the hydrogen bomb. It's the next generation of bombs here. Okay? And in 1952, the United States will detonate the world's first hydrogen bomb at the Bikini Atoll. Bikini, just like B-I-K-I-N-I, atoll, A-T-O-L-L. It's in the Pacific Ocean. An atoll is simply a group of islands. So the Bikini Islands in the South Pacific Ocean. The U.S. will test the world's first hydrogen bomb there in 1952. Okay? That is why you see at the bottom of the page here a picture of SpongeBob. That's why SpongeBob lives at a place called Bikini Bottom. And fish walk around with, multiple eyes and talking, and there's a squirrel down there in a spacesuit because of the radioactive material. The Bikini Atoll still is not safe for humans to live on. Animals, neither. So yes, there is actually a historic connection to SpongeBob. Who knew? Right? But anyway, so much for our continued discussions of the Cold War on this slide and U.S. security.